I'm Ann Russo, and I'm the current director of the Women's Center here at DePaul, and also a professor in Women's and Gender Studies. And very glad to see you here today for this event. Love and Protect is one of my favorite and much loved grassroots organizations in Chicago. This is a group that supports and works to free trans and non-trans women, gender non-binary and trans men of color who've been incarcerated for defending themselves from intimate and interpersonal violence. This is such an important moment right now to build support and care for those so unjustly incarcerated for just trying to survive. And also in this time of such incredible, just with the pandemic of COVID and its impact on those who are incarcerated. So today we're going to learn about how letter writing can be a powerful practice of abolition and freedom. Leading us today will be Rachel Caidor and Deana Lewis, and I'll introduce them a little bit more in a minute. First, I want to thank my co-organizer, Dr. Julie Moody Freeman, who's the director of the Center for Black Diaspora. And also, Jewel, do you want to introduce yourself, and then Jessica and Jennifer?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this event. My name is Jewel Daly. I'm the Assistant Director at the Center for Black Diaspora.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I am a student worker at the Center for Black Diaspora.
Hi, my name is Jessica, and I'm also a student worker at the Center for Black Diaspora.
Okay, thank you all. I've so appreciated our collaborations over the last year, and we have a whole set more of events coming up later that you'll hear about. I also want to thank our co-sponsors, the Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies program, the Community Service Studies program, American Studies, Critical Ethnic Studies, and the Department of Women's and Gender Studies. Today our program will include a presentation by Rachel and Deana, and there will also be a question and answer session. We encourage you to engage in the conversation and to ask questions through chat. So I want to offer an introduction to Deana and Rachel. They are both members of Love and Protect, and they're also both members of a collaborative called Just Practice. And it's a collaborative that builds capacity for people to address sexual and interpersonal violence through community accountability processes. And I'll put up a hub of materials if you're interested in that. Rachel has worked in Chicago's anti-violence field since 1997, working as, among many other things, the coordinator of the Chicago Rape Crisis Hotline, an assistant director of UIC's Campus Advocacy Network, and as the director of the Illinois Domestic Violence Hotline. She currently serves as the assistant director of UIC's Gender and Women's Studies program. So welcome, Rachel. Deana's scholarly and activist work focuses on trans and non-trans Black women and girls who've experienced state violence. Her research interests include Black girlhood studies, the school-prison nexus, and youth incarceration. More specifically, she's interested in Black girls' experiences within the school-to-prison pipeline and how their experiences have been left out of discourses about youth incarceration. Deana also works with the nationwide organization for incarcerated survivors called Survived and Punished, as well as the Chicago Community Bond Fund. So I want to welcome and hope we'll all warmly welcome Rachel and Deana, and I'll turn it over to you all now for the presentation. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Ann. I'm going to share my screen with everybody now. And come back. I'm going to go to the beginning because that's a good place to start. And here we are. So our conversation today is called Social Bridging Letter Writing as Freedom Work. And what we're interested in doing is talking about how to materially support folks who are incarcerated, specifically criminalized survivors. That's who Love and Protect supports. And our agenda for today, we're going to talk about Love and Protect and hopefully give you more information about what we do in our model of supporting incarcerated folks. We're going to talk about the criminalization of survivors and talk a little bit about domestic violence, more of a 101 briefly. We're going to talk about how important it is to build community with folks who are on the inside and connecting the outside to the inside through different types of correspondence. And then hopefully we're going to take action. So whenever we talk, and we meaning Love and Protect folks, we want people to leave the event we're doing having done something for the folks who are on the inside. We're interested in doing the actual stuff that we talk about. And then we're also going to do a poem to Tewkunzi Green, and we'll talk about Tewkunzi Green in just a minute. Now, I noticed some folks have their cute animals, and I love it. So you can drop their names in the chat if you'd like. But just to let you all know, come as you are. We love to see you. If there are people in the background, great. They can learn too, but just a heads up that we are going to be talking about some difficult stuff. It's absolutely fine, whoever is there, but just to give you a heads up. Okay. So briefly about Love and Protect, and here's our backwards logo behind me. So we're a grassroots volunteer collective in Chicago. We actually started as the Chicago Alliance to Free Marissa Alexander in 2013. So we've been working for a while to support criminalized survivors. And the people we support trans and non-trans women, trans men, gender non-conforming folks, mostly of color, mostly Black folks who have been criminalized for self-defense. And what I mean by that is folks who are who defended themselves against interpersonal violence, only to then experience state violence and be jailed, or by being jailed and imprisoned by the state. Our framework is a prison abolitionist feminist framework. So we're interested in not only, and I'm sure, in these times you've heard a lot about abolition, or at least I hope you have. I'm sure you've also heard a lot about feminism, at least I hope you have. And the framework that we're working from is not only dismantling the different ways the criminal legal system works, so policing, courts, prisons, jails, detention centers, ICE, and other arms of the state. What we're also interested in is building up capacity for people to address harm that happens in their communities and to keep each other safe through their communities. Because we know and we believe that the state is the main perpetrator of violence, especially against Black women, and especially against Black women who are living in communities that the state has disinvested from. So we're not just about the granular, so working with individual people. What we're also interested in is working in systems and dismantling systems and creating ways for people to fight violence and to find solutions that make more people safe and lessen the degree that interpersonal gender-based violence happens. Now I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Okay, thanks, Deana. Okay, thank you. That was a lot of information, and we really focus on survivors of interpersonal violence for a really specific reason. And it's because a lot of us came to this work either as practitioners in the field of healing against gender-based violence, but also a lot of us came to the work in understanding that femmes, women, cis and trans women experience criminalization in a really different way. And what we know is that a lot of people that are incarcerated are also survivors of violence. And this sort of overlap is where we've chosen to focus our work, because it is there's multiple layers of trauma there. So I'm gonna, I just have to warn you all that I went to Catholic school my whole life, which means I curse like a sailor. So we should all thank goodness that we're 10 minutes in and I haven't sworn yet. But I also invite you all to come as yourselves, and don't worry if you don't have the right words, if you in the questions that we ask. And because what we want to hear is from you. So before we get started and before I sort of like start lecturing at you, does anyone have some sort of like initial thoughts about like domestic violence specifically? Like, what have you heard? What have you seen in the media? How would you define it? Like, you can put it in the chat or you can just unmute and shout it out. Don't be shy. I mean, you can be shy, but do it anyway, because that's life. If you want to hold up your animal and make them talk, that's cool too. Mariana?
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Lately, domestic violence has been like, I don't know. Like, it's been a personal issue for me because someone I care about has been affected by domestic violence. Like my best friend, like she not too long ago broke up with an abusive partner, and he abused her domestically. So like, I feel like this issue has hit closer to home lately. So it's become more important to me, and I want to be a psychologist and get a PhD, and I want to possibly work with survivors of domestic violence. So I guess I just thought that I would put in my 2 cents.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry your friend went through that, but I'm glad that you're still there for her. And I think that Mariana, like one of the points that Mariana brings up a lot is that a lot of us conceive of domestic violence as something that happens like to like someone way out there. But what we know is that at least 1 in 4 women is going to be people who are identified as cis women, because we don't take good statistics on trans women and women across the spectrum. But conservative estimates say that 1 in 4 women are going to experience intimate partner violence over the course of their lifetime. And these numbers sort of change, not drastically, but they change depending on people's like social locations as well, because of the sort of intersections of the different kinds of institutions we are all trying to survive in. But what we know about domestic violence, like Aaron McKenna, I can't see, says it's often viewed as physical violence, but it's also emotional and mental, which is absolutely true. And state violence and Anna Maria are saying state violence and domestic violence are deeply interconnected. That is brilliant. Don't spoiler it for people because that's the rest of our presentation. But emotional and mental abuse, and it's a cycle. Thank you, Gabriella, for saying that, because I think what people often don't recognize in domestic violence is that it rarely starts off as something physical. It's usually like a pattern of emotional and mental sort of attempts at control that escalate into something physical. And then people engage what is known as the cycle of violence. That's, you know, like people talk about it as like a tension building phase where there's like a lot of emotional, mental, psychological, sort of logistical abuse. And then there is an explosion where sometimes it is violent, but very often it's just like, it could just be the thing that gets the survivor under control. And then there is what people call like the honeymoon phase, but a lot of clients that I've had call it the recapture phase, because it's not like a honeymoon. It's like I'm gonna get you, like I did this thing and it hurt you, and I'm trying to get you back into the cycle, either by making you understand that you're dependent on me for various things, etc. But what's really, really important to know about it is that it is not only a pattern, but it's a pattern that's actually like supported by and allowed to continue through the structures that we've built in our communities, right? So like domestic violence doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens because people sort of either decide it's not their business, or that they decide that it's the survivor's fault, and that, or this is just a fight or something personal. And so like that is yes, and it is really, really important to talk about it, because like a lot of people are trapped with abusive partners. And we're going to talk about what happens when people sort of confront their abusive partners in a minute. But I really, really, yeah, and it impacts the children. I really, really thank you all for all of these brilliant answers. We're gonna, these are all spot on. And so I'm glad to know that you all kind of don't need the one-on-one because you know what's, you sort of know what's happening. Like, can we see the next slide, Deana? I'm sorry. So like a majority of the people that we work with are survivors of domestic violence. And in the course of their survival, they like, how many of you have seen that Jennifer Lopez movie Enough? Like, I don't know, like Deana loves it. And Deana's like, Rachel, like people of a certain age didn't watch this movie, right? But like, whenever you hear these stories about domestic violence, we always hear these things about how survivors, like, why didn't she fight back? Or why didn't they fight back, right? And what we know is that especially Black and brown people who fight for their lives for survival often find themselves criminalized for the things that happen in the course of that fight, right? So Deana said we started off as the campaign to free Marissa Alexander. Do people remember her story at all? Yeah. Gabriella, do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to lay it on? Gabriella is like, I can't unmute myself.
Sorry.
All good, all good.
I would rather you talk about it. I did the DV 40-hour training, and so we talked about her, but I don't remember it well enough to talk about it.
Okay, it's okay. Marissa Alexander is a mother in Florida, my home state, whose abusive ex-husband was physically attacking her. She fired a warning shot into the wall with her registered firearm. No one was hurt except her because he was in the course of harming her. And because of racism and sexism, I was about to say because of Florida stand your ground laws, but I mean because of racism and sexism, she was then indicted for sort of manslaughter and faced over like 60 years of imprisonment for defending herself. And what we want to recognize is that what happened to Marissa and this sort of harm that comes to people as they're trying to survive is actually more common than we like to think about, right? And so that the implications for people defending themselves, especially physically, is that there is two choices for a lot of people of color. You either don't fight, or you fight, you survive, and then you're punished for surviving. That's hence the name of this group, Survived and Punished. And so we focus on criminalized survivors because what we've seen, and we're gonna finish this slide, is that policing and prisons are continuations of abuse. Because what we've seen is that as people experience this trauma of often domestic and sexual violence, a lot of which overlap, right? Like they're further re-traumatized by the way the state treats them. And in fact, the way state systems, especially criminal legal systems, treat people mirror very similarly how abusers treat the people that they're harming, right? And so you don't have to take my word for it. I keep trying to move my mouse as if I am the one controlling the screen because I have control issues, people. It's a real thing. Stand in your truth, everybody. So our friend Monica Cosby, who we'll hear from in a minute, who I worked with on the domestic violence hotline for a while and is also a formerly incarcerated person who also is a survivor of domestic violence, really did right, Monica, really did a lot for clarifying this sort of overlap between state violence and domestic violence. And so those of us who work in domestic violence field are really familiar with the power and control wheel. And so we're going to take you through a little bit of a primer on how how these two things overlap and why we think they're so critical. We're going to watch about 4 to 5 minutes of a video featuring Beth Ritchie and Monica Cosby talking about the overlap of domestic violence and state violence. Thanks, Deana.
When I started thinking about the power and control wheel, I was actually in prison, and I just happened to run across it from a roommate that had taken a domestic violence class. And I was looking at it, and it was like the day after a shakedown, right? The Orange Crush team came through, they tore up all our stuff, talked to us crazy, and just all the stuff that happens when they come. And it just kind of clicked. And I think it had been knocking around in my head for a while. But then when I saw the wheel that day, it just totally clicked, right? And I was like, this is exactly what happens. So, and the Orange Crush team came because the unit just kind of on one day just decided to cuss out the same CO because he was a jerk. He was a jerk. He was like, I got something for you. He cussed us out. He was like, I got something for y'all. And the next day, Orange Crush came through, right? And so that was straight up it was retaliatory because his feelings got hurt. And that's exactly what happened, right? And I started making the comparisons then. From the way that it feels to be in prison, just the feeling that it evokes, it's exactly the same. There's, I made a video like shortly after I first got out when we were talking about solitary confinement, but we talked about other things too. And one of the things that I said then was that it felt the same. It felt exactly the same. And that if there was anybody out here who'd never been in prison that could understand what it feels like to be in prison, it's someone that's been stuck in an abusive and violent relationship, right? And it wasn't until I think I had been locked up about maybe 8 years or something before I came across any kind of work that talked about prisons as anything other than this life-saving institution, right? And I always knew that it wasn't.
We are putting up the power and control wheel, the updated version, so that the folks at home can see the sort of similarities. And then we're going to walk through a little bit of how, the specifics of it. So thank you for your work, Monica. And I think that people inside and outside are presented this idea that it's a life-saving institution. It's saving the lives of the people who are inside by rehabilitating them, which is a lie, and saving the lives of those people on the outside by protecting them from harm doers, which is also a lie. So we're going to take a little bit of time to really dig deep into that. And that you started talking a little bit about intimidation and isolation. And so Monica, if you can talk to us a little bit about what that looks like. So when we take our training as DV advocates, we learn about how people who are harm doers, move their partners away from their families and then sort of create a system of dependence and then start monitoring their partner's every move and exerting power and control in that way. And so when it's time to reach out for help, the survivor is isolated. Similarly, after harm has happened to them, they don't have anyone left to support them because they've been often physically separated from the people that can see what's happening, but also emotionally. So can you tell us a little bit about how that isolation and intimidation looks like inside?
The same, except for the concrete walls and the bars and the barbed wire fences, right? So it's just a extra physical, right? It's an
All right, thank you, Deana. So this, I encourage you all, we're gonna put the link to this video in the chat later because it's a 57-minute and 15-second long deep dive into it. And it's a little bit like Inception, watching yourself on the video. So that's really weird. It's just too much Rachel. But what Monica goes on to describe is so eerily what we hear from a lot of survivors of domestic violence. Like when you are in prison, for example, you don't decide when you eat, you don't decide when you shower, you don't decide what you wear, you don't decide like who can touch you and who cannot touch you. You don't decide whether you get strip searched or not, right? Which is sexual violence. Your mail is read, for example. If your mail has glitter on it, it gets tossed out. You know, people can withhold your mail from you. Most people who are incarcerated hundreds, if not thousands of miles away from their families. So especially if you are a caregiving parent, which a lot of women and femmes are, that means they're separated from their children. You have to pay to talk on the telephone very often, which means that there's financial separations that are being put in place to keep you from connecting with people on the outside world. And what that means is like very much like in a situation where you're being harmed by your partner, you're completely dependent on an institution that is completely invested in controlling your every move, and also has structurally created a situation physically and emotionally where you can't actually communicate with someone on the outside and get the support and help you need without being monitored, and as Monica was talking about, being retaliated against by the person who's harming you, right? And so one of the things that Love and Protect really likes to, like not likes to because it's hard work, but one of the things that we uplift all the time is that over and over again, survivors of sexual and domestic violence are asked to, like, if something happens, call the cops, or like the system, the criminal legal system is going to keep you safe. When what we know is that the criminal legal system acts exactly like the way someone's abusers acted. So that is not the place where we're going to send people to get safety, but it is the place where we need to start looking and taking care, just like those of us who are taking care of our friends who are in interpersonal domestic violence relationships. Like it's incumbent upon us to take care of our friends who are in this abusive relationship with the state and are being trapped by this relationship with the state, right? Thank you. I think, do people have thoughts and questions around that really quick?
There's some thoughts in the chat right now
Yeah.
that folks are discussing. I mean, while you look through that, I just also want to point out that, you know, we're in multiple pandemics right now, but thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic and putting the state and other states on lockdown, while was helpful for many folks, actually put a lot of people in harm's way. And I'm not just talking about the people who are in interpersonal violence situations. I'm talking about the people who are incarcerated and who don't have any ways to move. Not even within the actual prison. They didn't have access, and still many don't have access to PPE. So essentially what the state has done is provided all of the people who are incarcerated with a death sentence. Because COVID-19, we know that it spreads very quickly through small spaces like nursing homes, like jails, like prisons. The other part of that, and one of the reasons we're talking today about letter writing and connecting with folks on the inside, is that many folks, actually folks on the inside, haven't seen their family or friends since at least March, because the IDOC and many other states, so the Illinois Department of Corrections, has put a lockdown on people visiting their incarcerated loved ones since March. So that also means, as Rachel was saying, that the people who are parenting or trying to parent from behind bars haven't seen their children in 6 months at least, and it looks like they're not going to see them for another long period of time. So it's, again, this abusive relationship that's not only between individuals, but really how the state comes in and replicates these type of abusive relationships or abusive patterns and continues to replicate those types of patterns.
And we're going to send you a copy of this PowerPoint, and in the PowerPoint, you're going to see the power and control wheel, and you'll see how people sort of use children against survivors, use financial control over survivors, use sexual violence against survivors. But one of the things, and to Mariana's point in the chat about, for example, the yellow paper, like it doesn't make sense, right? But this is the thing that we have to remember when we're talking about domestic violence and state violence, is that the person or the entity trying to exert power and control, like the rules are always a moving benchmark, and they're designed to keep the survivor disoriented. So we never know, for example, when we're going to be able to send masks inside and when we're not going to be able to send masks inside. Like when I would do DV education, I would tell people, like, it's never about the burnt rice. It's never about whatever the survivor did to piss off the harm doer, because the harm doer decides at that moment when they're going to exert power and control. And so these ideas about, like, if a person is just like a model inmate, right, or if they are a model imprisoned person, then no harm will come to them, is the same sort of like false narrative that we talk about when we victim blame survivors in abusive relationships, because these rules are actually really arbitrary and designed to disorient people and designed to remind people that they don't actually have control. So like, I don't understand, like, for example, the yellow paper, the glitter, like, who knows, right? I don't know one prison uprising that like used glitter as a weapon to stab anybody, but alas, it's a rule, right? And so like, our friend Ches, who's in Love and Protect, teaches inside prisons, and one of the things that she learned is, like, someone told her, is that like prison is the complete absence of like rationality, right? Like, so like, and that's the way to think about prison, as a mirror of an abusive relationship, because the goal isn't about sort of like giving people a structure. The goal is actually about making someone understand they have no control, which, if you think about the fact that we're talking about a group of people who've already entered the system, already carrying so much trauma from surviving in their interpersonal relationships, only to be moved into a system that replicates that almost exactly. We're talking about compounded complex trauma and of a really, really invisibilized population, which takes us to our next slide.
Yes. So on your screen is Cece McDonald. And Cece McDonald in 2011 defended herself against a racist, transphobic, misogynistic attack from not people that she knew, but people who were at a bar. And as she defended herself, she defended herself physically, against these people who were trying to beat her down for being herself, for being a Black trans woman. She was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. And in 2012, she was sentenced in 2012 and served 19 months in prison, and in a prison that did not match her gender, in a men's prison, which only provided or only opened up more opportunities for her to experience harm, which she did. Instead of protecting Cece and saying, yes, you are allowed to defend yourself against violence in ways that make you safe in that moment, the state said, no, because of who you are going to jail. You're going to prison. You're going to pay for this because somebody somebody died, even though they were attacking you. And there were multiple campaigns once people heard about Cece's case to get her out. And that's what happened. Her sentence, even though she did serve 19 months, she was able to get a shorter sentence after all these people were doing different campaigns. So writing letters, not only to her, but to the state's attorneys, to the DAs, and really publicizing that this was actually injustice that was happening and not justice for anybody, that Cece serving time actually didn't keep anybody safe. It wasn't that she was imprisoned was not about justice. It was about retaliation, right? And so Cece is currently out and doing wonderfully, doing a lot of different speaking gigs. And she says here in this quote, "I never expected that people would look up to me. In prison, I got lots of letters of support. It showed that people cared. I never thought that people were actually seeing me as this leader or a role model. It's really amazing that it got to this level. And I'm glad that I have this platform so I can get the word out about the prison industrial complex, trans women, African-American trans women, people of color." That's from Cece. So Cece didn't go into, when she was incarcerated, she talks about how she wasn't necessarily an abolitionist. She knew that she was incarcerated wrongly and that other people like her were incarcerated wrongly. And when she came out, she was like, this is ridiculous. And she became abolitionist and started speaking out about these miscarriages of justice. Not that we can get any justice in this criminal legal system. Okay. So it leads me to the next, our next slide about our support model. So Love and Protect we're survivor centered. So we believe survivors, we're interested in what the survivors that we work with, what they want. We don't do things we don't do different campaigns without survivors' consent. We are working on different clemency campaigns for different people. We don't do that without the survivors being a part of that work, and also we don't do it without their legal team and the other folks that the survivors want to bring in, because it's about the survivor. It's not about us feeling good about doing something, right? So that the collaboration of us as Love and Protect, the survivor, their legal team, and their support folks is really important. And we want to stay in contact with everybody so that we're collaborating, that we're not putting out a petition, let's say, or sending letters to the state's attorneys or prosecutors without the survivor and the legal team looking it over or saying that it's okay, because there are things that can happen, retaliation that can happen on the inside, so behind bars, that we don't feel, right? Because we're on the outside and we're like, oh yay, we sent this letter and it's a scathing letter, and the prosecutor's going to read it and they're going to be like, oh yes, I have to get this person out. And instead, what can happen is that the prosecutor's like, what? No, and just instead go on a retaliatory type of campaign against that person. So it's really important that we are collaborating with folks. The legal needs, we work with folks who are pre-trial, so before they actually go to trial, pre-trial, hello, and before they get sentenced. We also work with folks who are post-conviction, so they've received their sentence, they're in, and unfortunately they've been sent to prison. And this connects with material needs, safety needs, and emotional support. So the material needs, think about it as letters, right? That's one thing. Or recently, Rachel just mentioned that we were trying to send masks inside the prisons and the jail to help people stay safe against COVID-19. And so we asked people to make homemade masks. We were very specific about the ways that they had to be made, specifically because the prisons are arbitrarily denying certain things, like you can't, the strings can't be too long, you have to use this type of cloth, and so on and so forth. And we asked people to follow those guidelines, and they did. And then we find out that the masks are not getting in, right? So we have to figure out a different tack. So as Rachel was mentioning, the arbitrary nature of things being denied entry into the prisons because the state just wants to have control. That sucks, but we are also agile. So we will also move, say, okay, well, if you don't want that, then we're going to come at you in a different way, because it's important for us that the people that we work with and that we care for are being safe. The emotional support, so we ask folks to send letters like we're going to ask you to do today. We also support folks in Love and Protect. So we each have relationships with the people that we work with on the inside. So it's not just, hey, here's some money, or hey, we see you, talk to you when you get out. What we're doing is we send letters, we build relationships, because again, we're working in collaboration and we're interested in the whole person, and we're interested in becoming friends. We're not interested in being saviors. That's not our model. We're not interested in charity. What we're interested in is liberation and liberating all people. And so we see this letter writing as abolitionist praxis. And through that, when we're the contextualized personal experiences, so we talk about people's experiences pretty graphically, so that people know exactly what's happening when we're talking about interpersonal violence and criminalized survival. And we're presenting these examples and these folks or their stories as, hey, these are people, and these people are having horrible things happening to them on the outside, and now they've been sent on the inside and having other horrific things happen to them. All right.
So we at Love and Protect know why we write people, and I'm going to want to hear from Cass in a minute if you feel comfortable talking. But before that, sort of like show of hands, has anyone ever communicated or written to anyone who is incarcerated? Could you drop that in the chat? It could just be like a me, or you could sort of like talk a little bit about it. Or like, what have you heard in the media about it, right? About sort of communicating with people who are incarcerated. Go ahead and either drop it in the chat or just everybody talk at the same time. Oh, somebody was in an Inside Out program. That's cool. Those things are so valuable. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I want to hear about that in a minute. Anyone else have experience between this? Oh, yes. Oh, and family. Thank you, Francesca. Yeah, and visits are so crucially important. And as Deana said, like, imagine not seeing, like, you can't even have a socially distanced hang, you know, right now with your incarcerated loved ones. And it's really, really hard. A lot of people are saying that they've visited as a child. Like visits, I'm seeing a lot of visits in the chat. And I think that that's super, super important, because like that, like the physical isolation that comes with being incarcerated is almost inexplicable. If you ever have time, I really encourage you to read this anthology called The Long Term, that talks about people who are incarcerated for a really long time, and the impact that like that physical isolation has on you. And oh, somebody works at the Liberation Library. Excellent. Okay, so I love the Liberation Library Project, and Cass, maybe at the end of this, you can tell people what the Liberation Library does, so that if they want to plug into, like, we want to give people as many routes to plug into as possible. So, oh, cool. Because, you know, like I feel like a lot of people actually don't have a real, like, have experience that's rooted in reality when it comes to communicating with people on the inside, right? Like, I don't know if you watch as much true crime as Deana and I do, but like, it's a weird irony of our abolitionist practice. We do a lot of deconstructing of snapped, but like, you read all the time about these stories where sort of someone forms a relationship with someone inside, and the person inside is like a dangerous person. And like, oh, thank you. Oh, I think that's Jacinda. But like, we hear these stories about, like, people who are inside exploiting their relationships with people on the outside. And that is actually just not, like, that may happen, but that's not mostly what happens, right? I think that one of the things that is a part of is this mythology of like the people who are locked up sort of deserve to be erased. And so we hear this all the time from Ruthie Wilson Gilmore, that that prisons don't erase problems, they erase people. And one of the ways that you erase people is by making them not even worth communicating with, right? And so like, these ideas of sort of building relationships with people inside become like, like, it becomes a risk that we're taught. Like, we're taught in outside, we're taught in sort of like outside society that we are somehow risking our own safety by creating community with people inside, when we know that the opposite is true. So like, for those of you who've visited people or written people inside, like, what are some of the positive things that have come out of those experiences, or hard things? You can share those too. And we'll talk about whether you can send photos in a minute. I see y'all in the chat, active. Like, what are some like positive or gains that you see in communicating with folks inside? What's
I can go.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Anna Maria. I participated in the Inside Out program, and it was really great, like, talking with like the inside students. Like, we always, like, we were able to talk about like essentially anything before class started. When class started, we obviously focused on our schoolwork, but we would, like, when we talk to each other, they would always say how like sometimes it's like really hard to like even have these kind of conversations that we're having in class, because essentially the state didn't want them to talk about these things, to have these discussions. So like, it was very like freeing for them to be able to be like, oh, I can talk about other things that made, like, like, quote unquote, like, made my mind think more. So it was like, it was a really like nice experience for us to be able to talk face to face and have these discussions in class that probably wouldn't have happened anywhere else.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And thanks for sharing that experience and going through that. I'm seeing really awesome things like connection and information sharing. And it's like, you share it, like, you can share life, relationships, and love and respect and hope, and that you can see people's humanity and dignity. And I think that, thank you, Francesca, for that, because I think that that is like one of the key points of why Love and Protect really focuses on letter writing as freedom work, right? Like, we see it not only as freedom work, we see it as like the protect part of our Love and Protect name, right? Because, and again, to echo the way this mirrors abusive relationships, like, abusers count on survivors being isolated. Abusers count on survivors believing that no one is paying attention to what's happening. And so what we know about life inside is that, like, everyone is in a sort of like black box, right? Like, it's in a concrete box, actually. And mail calls are a public event. And when people receive mail, when they receive care packages, when they receive sort of a card or a postcard, it signals not only to that person, but actually to the guards, everybody on the block, everybody else, that this person is still connected to the outside world, that people are still checking for them. And that is really, really important, not only for your humanity, but also if you're in physical danger, which every single human being inside a prison is, right? And so, number one, it signals a degree of safety. Like, we can't keep people safe inside, but we can tell the institution, this person is not alone. You did not manage to disappear this person. It also sort of like breaks up that that very, very violent, like emotional isolation. Like, I know that when I write my friend in prison, Debraka, like she's like, she like had no clue about the sort of like culture of lockdown, for example, out here. And like what, like she's like, oh, you all have lockdown now too, you know, because like people, the information in the news that people get filtered to them through the institution is always incomplete, right? And so people rely on their outside relationships to give them a connection to the outside world. So we have friends who had been inside for many like decades, and who had been so isolated that by the time they came out, they were like, what the hell is email? What the hell is a Facebook? You know, like how do you use a cell phone? Oh my God, they completely rerouted the blue line. You know, it's these sort of like little details of life that people, like the little details of life that make us all sort of like humans in the world feeling complete, are deliberately kept from people, right? And so one of the things about letter writing is helping people feel connected to you as a person, but to a world that we are hoping that they eventually get to participate in, right? And so like, I know that in a lot of these events, people are like, I don't want to talk to this person about how like it's a lovely spring day in Chicago, that one day that we get for spring, because like people are like, that's going to make this person feel bad. But in my experience, a lot of people actually want to hear about that, because the hope is that people will come out, and the hope is that they're going to come out to a world that somehow is like, they have some sense of that world. And so like, we look at letter writing as an abolitionist praxis because it's about forming community, despite the fact that this institution is trying to get people not to form community. It is like the equivalent of calling your friend who's in an abusive relationship like over and over again, despite the fact that their partner like is like, oh, your friend is like getting in our business, right? So like that is a major cornerstone of the work that we do, and part of also why we invest is that a lot of our friends, not a lot, hopefully a lot, some of our friends actually do get out, and it's really important for people who get out to know that they have a community to come out to, right? Like they have at least one person that that's seen them transition through the sort of like period of isolation into a period of a different kind of isolation when you are yanked out of your context, which even if it's prison becomes your context, right? So letter writing is so, so important. I think Deana has a clip that we're gonna play in a minute, sort of from a survivor, Sherelle Baldwin, who many of us supported, talking about like the impact of receiving mail and receiving all of this love from the outside.
Yes, so this is Sherelle Baldwin. She was incarcerated for defending herself against her abusive partner in Connecticut. And we didn't hear about her case for a long period of time. She was incarcerated for 3 years. And this was pre-adjudication. So before she even went to trial, she was in jail for 3 years and was losing hope. And then somehow Holly Craig from Moms United Against Violence and Incarceration, which is located in Chicago and does a lot of amazing work, somehow heard about Sherelle and got in contact with Sherelle's mother, got in contact with Sherelle, and was able to get a bunch of us to together to fight to free Sherelle. And at this point, when we heard about Sherelle's case, she had a trial, it went into mistrial. The prosecutor tried her again, mistrial, and then Sherelle was going to be charged for the third time. Now, that's asinine. At some point, first of all, she shouldn't have had to go through any trial. But on the third time, it is not the charm, right? It is time to drop the charges and let Sherelle free. And also to note her son, her son is growing up without her, right? During this entire time. So I'm going to play this clip, and it's going to pop out. Can you see the screen?
It's blue.
The website?
Yep.
Okay. So this is Sherelle, and this is Marissa Alexander to Michelle's right.
Because you did everything, you took all the right steps. You called the police. You got away from that person. And it's just, what are you supposed to do? Just to keep allowing it to keep happening? They show up at your job. They get you fired from your job. You clear out your bank account. It's just, you don't have nothing left. So how do you survive? Then I started getting all these letters. My mom told me that I got some letters from people on the outside. And I'm like, who are these people? I'm saying, I'm so emotional. I'm always crying. So I'm sitting here on the phone crying. Who are these people sending me letters? And she's like, Holly and Stacy. She's naming people. And I'm like, who? She's like, they're from Chicago and California. And I'm like, and then I started getting the letters. And I'm like, who are these people writing me? I'm like, these people don't care about me. And then, you guys actually did care about me. And that's what kept me from committing suicide. Because 3 years is a long time to be incarcerated and not be with your son. And he's back and forth between houses. And it's just, if my mom didn't fight for me, I don't know where I would be right now. And you guys fighting for me, oh my God. I just think about it every day because I'm like, I seen the petition when I got out. And I'm like, really? There's people that actually seen my case. You think people don't care about you, but people actually do care. People go through similar situations.
That's a really powerful clip from Sherelle, and just talking about the importance of people on the outside extending care and support and love to people on the inside, and that folks really appreciate it, and it has helped folks survive or fight their own convictions, fight against their convictions, fight during their trials, just knowing that there are people who are out here supporting them. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about a person that we're fighting for right now. This is Tewkunzi Green. And Tewkunzi is currently incarcerated. She was sentenced to 34 years in prison for defending herself and her infant son against a brutal attack by her then partner. And as her partner strangled her and was committing violence against her while she was holding her son, and they were in the kitchen, Tewkunzi, trying to protect themselves, her and her son, reached back on the counter, grabbed something, and stabbed her partner. It wasn't on purpose. It was to get out of a horrific situation. And when she went to trial, she was found guilty and sentenced to those 34 years. She has tried to appeal, and she has lost her appeals. And right now, what we and other folks are trying to do is get Governor Prince Pritzker to grant clemency. We want Tewkunzi out as soon as possible. So we are working on a clemency petition with her support folks, and her legal team. And if in the meantime, we would love to see Tewkunzi out on a medical furlough, because as I was saying before, COVID-19 is a death sentence for folks who are in prison, and it is especially so for folks who have underlying conditions. So yeah, this is Tewkunzi.
And so, like every other survivor that Love and Protect works with, and like every survivor inside and outside, Tewkunzi has been in charge of her survival from the beginning. And Tewkunzi is like such an extraordinary human being. Deana, did you have the writing from Tewkunzi, or were we not able to find that?
I was not able to find it.
Okay, that's a shame. We may follow up with that, because Tewkunzi, in her time inside, has become, like so many people that we work with, an organizer in her own right. So she's not only organizing on behalf of herself, but she's also organizing on behalf of all of the survivors that she knows inside, all of the parents that she knows inside, all of the like asthmatic people who are struggling with asthma inside. Like, she's a really phenomenal person. And one of the reasons why Tewkunzi is so dear to us is because she's such like such an active member of our community, despite the state doing everything they can to keep her apart from not only those of us who are friends with her, but from everybody, right? So like Tewkunzi has been put in solitary confinement, or the seg, they call it segregation, for her own protection, sometimes they say, which is classic abuser behavior. Like, they've put her in seg after she's tried to organize people for better conditions inside. And we're working really, really hard on Tewkunzi's petition, but Tewkunzi has been inside for a really, really long time. And so we like to give her as much love as possible. So I'm hoping, are people down to do a little bit of an exercise to show some love to Tewkunzi? Yeah, awesome.
Rachel, I have one of her letters here. I can read part of it. All right,
okay, Deana's gonna give you a little sort of kernel. Like, Tewkunzi is such a delightful human that it's like, yeah, words are not actually enough to convey it, but Deana's gonna give us a little bit of like words from her heart in a minute.
Yes, I'm gonna stop my video really quickly.
Yeah.
This is Connect with Tewkunzi. My name is Tewkunzi, but I prefer to be called Kwanzi. I am currently incarcerated for the time being, hoping that one day I will be released. However, this moment of telling you all about me will definitely be a blessing to my soul. I hope you enjoy it as much as I have to tell it. Growing up, I had dreams to be bigger and better than my family. I wanted to be a hairstylist who owned her own hair salon / massage bar, to own a nightclub in memory of my late paternal grandfather, to have a family with a well-respected man who knows how to treat me like a queen. Indeed, all my dreams have failed, and I didn't even get a chance to accomplish not one. Why? Because Tewkunzi was lost since she was a little girl, and she lived her life in pieces and secrets. Dreams were lost. Confused as I can be, don't know which way to go or turn in life. No one here to protect me or tell me it's okay. Then all of a sudden, something snapped inside of me that made me realize I am better than my secrets, and I can connect with others by expressing it. I'm going to skip forward. She talks about her childhood and how she has, how she's grown. And she, this part I really like. The best part of all of this is I've gotten to a place in my path that I'm able to talk and be real instead of feeling guilty, shame, and living in secret. A person that has never experienced some time in jail or prison doesn't know that prison can be an intervention, a safe house, and a peacemaker for someone. For me, it's an intervention for me to move forward in life. At first, I thought, why did the judge sentence me to all these years to prison? He doesn't even know who I am or what I've been through. But the help I've gotten through groups, through classes, I can change it if I only put the work into it. And she goes on to say, I can't let nothing or nobody get between what I want to do for myself and my son. My calling is to help others realize they are amazing, no matter how deep the situation can be. Nothing is better than looking forward to a better life with new beginnings.
She is amazing. Deana, you're still sharing your screen, and could
Yes.
you unshare so that we can do, like, you have a not Mac, so it's easier for you to take a screen grab in a minute. But I would like to propose that we all send a collective note to Tewkunzi. People feeling good about that? I'm seeing some nods. I'm pretending that the little dark squares are also nodding. I'm very good at pretending about the little dark squares. And so, oh, thanks, Nat. And so, all right, I want everyone to sort of like take a moment and think about what listening to Tewkunzi's words felt like, especially sort of like those of us after hearing a lot about sort of like the isolation that that prisons and abuse create in survivors. Every time I hear Tewkunzi's words, I'm always like super emotionally like overwhelmed with like how resilient her spirit is despite all of these things. Like she is a survivor in every sense of the word. So that's probably what I'm going to write in the chat. So I want to give everybody a sort of like 30 seconds. I don't know how to count 30 seconds to sort of like think through something you'd like to write to Tewkunzi. Just like a line is enough, right? And just like drop it in the chat for her. And what we're going to do in the meantime is, Deana, can you take screenshots of each page so that we can like print them out and send them to her?
I can do better than that. I can just download the chat.
Yes, but I want her to see the pictures of the people.
Oh,
You know
I can do that too.
Yeah, you see? So go ahead and drop it in the chat. I'm going to start because I have control issues. I'll be like, thank you. So I just wrote a big thanks to her because she inspires me every time I think about her. So no pressure if you don't feel moved, just, it's okay. Like, this is not a graded thing, but I can promise you Tewkunzi will be so happy to hear anything from anyone.
And I'm going to take screenshots and then crop the photos out in case people don't want to be in them.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't want to be in the photo, also feel free to unface yourself. I don't know how to, what's the photo equivalent of unmuting yourself?
Mute your face?
Yeah, mute your face.
But then your name is up there. So I'll crop everybody out.
Okay.
And I'll ask Joelle, Julie, or Anne if you can download the chat, the entire chat for us at the end and send it to us. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Yay. Oh, this is so great. Thank you.
Because I can also we can also take out folks' names.
All of these messages are great. And what watching these messages come through the chat tells me is that you all already know how to connect with people inside, right? So it's not wholly different than communicating with people who are outside, right? Like you want to share love, you want to share openness, you want to share community, you want to share a little bit about yourself and not yourself. And so when we get to the sort of like after the Q&A, we're going to do a little like instructional, but like, and we can talk to you a little bit about like getting started as a letter writer, if that's a thing that you want. And there's several people in the room already, this huge room already, who know how to do it. So I'd love to hear from Cass and other folks who do write people inside, Jacinda, Francesca, everybody, just about how, you know, like how to get that conversation started, if that's a thing that you're interested in. Yay. Oh, you're not alone. Excellent, excellent. Thank you, everyone. This is so beautiful. I love these sort of collective experiences because this is exactly what we want to create, both in, you know, as an abolitionist practice, right? Like abolition is about building as much as it is about tearing something down. And what we're doing is building a bridge to Tewkunzi and letting her know, like much like Sherelle was like, these people don't know me. Like now you all know about Tewkunzi, and then maybe you'll feel moved to learn about other criminalized survivors, or maybe you'll be moved to learn about other people who don't identify as survivors, but who are isolated behind prison walls. And you may think like, it's okay for you to reach out, which is what we want you to do. Thank you. Oh, thanks, Anne. All right, this is beautiful. I'm in my feeling. I have one. I
agree.
I just used it.
I agree that you have one feeling too.
I have one feeling, and that feeling is sweaty. All right, so I think that this is great. Like, are we comfortably in the question and answer portion?
Yes, we should move to that.
Yeah. Lay us the questions.
What
and
cues do
answers
you
if
have?
you have them. Yeah. What?
Cues.
Cues?
Questions?
Oh, okay. Yes, cues. Any cues? And I think that several people are sending questions over to Joelle or Jessica.
To me.
Okay. Oh, wait. Who was the me? Oh, Joelle. Yeah. Okay. I was on page 2 when I heard you to me. Okay. Someone said someone wants the best place to get started in terms of writing those inside. Do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that?
Sure. So you've started. This is the best place to get started. Because we're doing this kind of introduction and talking about this, that you have started on your way. And I want to, there are a few things that we should talk about. And if you have plain paper, if you have a pen, you can start writing to folks on the inside, and we'd love for you to write to Tewkunzi. When I first started writing folks, I was like, what do I say? I don't know what to say. How do I do this? And it can be just even talking about this event, right? Why did you come to this event? Who held this event? What did you learn at this event? And doing that on just plain old paper with a pen, and then getting a regular envelope, you know, and we'll put up the address and such, and dropping it in the mail is a great place to start.
Right. Remember to use a black pen or a blue pen, because prison is a joyless place, so no pink ink. And also, like, a good place to start is, I like I told you, I went to Catholic school my whole life. So we did a lot of anti-death penalty work. So I spent a lot of time in my teens writing to people who were on death row. And like Deana, it's awkward, and it's a manufactured awkwardness, because like once I got my mind around the fact that like the world is telling me that this is a dangerous person, like this person's bio is someone on death row, when this person's bio for themselves is like, I'm somebody's uncle, I'm a cat lover, I am someone who really likes to read science fiction, you know, and sort of like entering the relationship like that is the best first step, I think, because it helps that person realize that you are there not to be like a savior or not as a pity person. Like it's about building that relationship. We do, okay, I see you, Anna Maria, and I have an answer. We do ask people though, when you are writing someone inside, to be really careful not to write about the specifics of their case, right? Because those cases are very often pending, and people are appealing. And also remember, there's no privacy, right? So there's no expectation that somebody's letters are not going to be read. In fact, they have to be read. And so like, yes, you will feel compelled to write fuck 12 all over the margins of your paper, but that will make you feel very righteous. But then that may actually make it so that this person doesn't eventually, like that letter doesn't make it through the censors, right? And so like, it's a really fine line, because it's, you know, you want to connect with this person, but you also know that there is surveillance happening on both sides. In the same way that like, you know, like you ask your pen pal or the person you're writing, like if you want them to write you back and you ask them questions, they're going to send questions to, you know, they're going to send answers to you, and those answers are going to get read as well, right? And so asking questions like, are they treating you like shit inside? You know, like you know, you want to be really strategic about the way that you ask people how they're doing inside, because retaliation is a very real thing inside prisons. And so usually people just are like, how are you doing? Like, I am obsessed with television, so I ask a lot of people questions about television. Like, I love to eat, so I talk a lot about food, you know, and then I talk about like the chaos of my home, where I'm moving, right? So, you know, and it's a regular schmegular ass conversation that may take a long time depending on the medium that you use, but it is. Yeah, and thank you. Deana is putting a lot of really great stuff in the chat about remembering like the literacy level of everyone. So so just sort of thinking through, like, you may be talking to people who like don't have a lot of advanced reading skills, or some people who have their PhDs, or are lawyers. I, for example, have really, 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 really tiny handwriting that's almost actually illegible. So I have taken to typing my letters out. You see, I have typewriters. Like, I type my letters very often because people can't read my writing. So so it's, you know, like, think about sort of accessibility when you're writing, and also be like, remember that you are like the structure of prisons is designed to make isolation like the default. So for example, if someone wants to send you an email back, they have to pay for that. So if you do engage in if you want to stick around, we'll show you how to use the like email option for writing people inside. But very often when we write people inside, we pay enough into the system so that they can use the money that we paid to write us back, right? Because we want to create as many we want to make it as easy for people to communicate with you. And so like with my friend Zabraka, I just like send her 20 credits. She doesn't have to write, you know, and she knows like I don't expect 20 letters back from her. It's for her to write everybody else. So that's really, really, that's one of the things that's really a good place to start. Another way people enter into this work is figuring out sort of like a group of people that you feel specifically like you want to reach out to. So Love and Protect, we have a whole host of survivors who are criminalized that we support, and we'll be happy to share with you some of their information. They're on our website, loveprotect.org. But, you know, Black and Pink is a national organization that does specific work with trans and queer and gender nonconforming LGBTQ folks inside. And so I've been writing people through Black and Pink for years. Like I said earlier, I used to write a lot of people who were on death row. There are lots of organizations that do in-reach to people who are on death row. You know, there's organizations that help do in-reach to sort of, you know, like Latinx like Latinx people inside, or people who identify as Muslims inside. So there's a host of ways to plug in. What's important is like plugging in and like opening yourself up to an authentic relationship. And if you don't want to have a relationship, like an ongoing pen palship, it's okay to send somebody a postcard. It's okay to send Tewkunzi a postcard that's like, hey, I learned about your case. I'm thinking about you. Here's a postcard, you know, like, thank you for surviving, you know, and that is also really, really appreciated by people. Okay.
Can I jump in real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So we suggest just plain paper, just plain white paper, black or blue pen, no markers. There's no rhyme or reason, no markers, no crayons,
no stickers,
anything like that. But I will say, I did get these cards that I love. Oh, can you see them? No. There you go.
I see a unicorn.
Yeah, with a unicorn on it, and it's just a plain card, you know, and white on the inside. Because I like to send cards that have something nice, but, you know, will get through IDOC on the outside, so that they can have, if they wanted to keep this and hang it in their cells, that they have it. So those can sometimes are okay to send. And Cass just reminds folks here, that if you're sending mail to other places, that you need to check the DOC website for that place. So for instance, we were supporting someone in Michigan, and they only allowed plain paper with a black or blue pen. There were no cards, certainly like no construction paper, no cardstock, nothing like that in. So it is important to check that. Yeah, so that's what I had. And then there was another question in the chat that somebody had. How do we go about donating stuff like books?
Yeah.
So right now, I know that Illinois jails or Illinois prisons, you have to go through a vendor. Like, you can't pack up the books and send them. I'm not sure about other states. Also, the books can't be hardback. That's for sure. Only paperback. And to just also note, there's some things that won't get in, which is asinine. And again, it's a moving target. So there are some books that have been banned from certain prisons, based on the prison's discretion. Again, and they don't have to tell us why. They don't have to have any type of transparency. But the person from LibLib might be able to tell us more, because they're sending books into to juvenile prisons. Yes, there are prisons for kids.
Yes. So Cass just put in the chat that you like you can send somebody a book by looking up their name and their number, because every incarcerated person is a number. It's really horrible. And then you find the facility name and the address. And that is if you know it. And so like that's one avenue to look at things. Cass, Liberation Library has been able to get people stuff too. Do you want to put in the chat Liberation Library's email or like Facebook? Also, where did your cat go? I know that Chicago Books to Women in Prison, where I also volunteer because I have no life, like they have been getting books successfully through, and they are currently not accepting books, but they will eventually start accepting books again. So a lot of the things that are super popular with people are like history books and romance novels and mysteries and like cooking books and stuff like that. So so you know, like also Moms United Against Violence and Incarceration, like they often have supply drives for clothing, like maxi pads, because a maxi pad costs $1 million inside, all sort of, you know, other supplies. So like Moms United is a really great resource for people who are interested in like donating material supplies to people who are inside. Moms United also, like Love and Protect, supports people as they're coming outside. So, and that's part 2 of this workshop, is like we will talk about like the importance of building community as people come out of prison, because one day we're going to free them all, and they're all going to come back, and we're going to need to know how to care for our formerly incarcerated peeps. So yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Lay it down. Yes.
No, I had a question, and that question was about how does Love and Protect work with domestic abuse shelters in the city of Chicago, or is the work just done once the women have been incarcerated? Is there work being done before they, as sort of, not that it's a preventative measure, but inside the women's shelters?
That's a very good question. Deana, do you want to talk about it?
No, you're the expert here. You do it.
I'm not the expert. I'm a hater. I'm an expert hater. This is actually like a real point of struggle for not only Love and Protect, but people who live at the intersection of like domestic violence advocacy and abolition, because actually DV shelters are themselves they replicate prison a lot, right? So like they're very controlling. You have to like you don't get to pick when you eat, you don't get to pick who you talk to, and very often if you have any sort of criminal record, you're not actually allowed in the shelter. Right. So, and what we know is that a lot of survivors, before they're incarcerated for whatever actions they took for their survival, are often incarcerated for other sort of survival crimes, like, you know, low-level drug stealing, like low-level drug dealing, or sort of like shoplifting and stuff like that. And that actually excludes a lot of people from getting services from mainstream DV orgs. And so it's been really, really hard. Like I have been up people's ass at various shelters trying to get them to connect with us, not only to make shelters sort of spaces where a lot of our pretrial people, so like one of the struggles that we have is that several of the people that we work with who are pretrial actually couldn't get into DV shelters because they had an active murder case, right? And so like a lot of people ended up, you know, like if we were able to bond them out of like Cook County, we couldn't actually find supportive services for them to live in. And that's a huge that's a really, really important issue when it comes to like people navigating compounded trauma of domestic violence, is that because so many social services themselves are in lockstep with the prison industrial complex, survivors are excluded. So like we don't work that closely with DV shelters because it's often really hard. That said, we have had really successful partnerships with a couple of individual legal advocates who have had to swim upstream in their organizations to be able to support survivors who have murder charges against their harm doers. So that's a definite avenue that we recognize as a place that needs institutional advocacy. And so we're trying to do a lot of work with agencies, because also what we know is that like a lot of survivors end up in prison because of the very laws that pretended to be about keeping survivors safe. So many parents, for example, are in prison under failure to protect laws, where if somebody's abuser harms your child, you end up blamed for that harm because you're supposed to be protecting the child, or you failed to protect this child. So very often social service agencies aren't great. Weirdly, we work a lot closer with like transitional houses and halfway houses as people are coming out. They have been more open to housing people who are pretrial, who are survivors, which is great. But then those spaces actually don't have the sort of like targeted trauma counseling that people often need. It's a hot mess out here, people. We need all of you on the team.
Yeah, and I say Rachel's the expert because she's been working in different DV places and working on this exact issue of trying to understand that there is no such thing as a perfect victim, and that people specifically mainstream DV and SA places need to support survivors, support them materially, financially, emotionally. And there are also other people in Love and Protect in our collective who've been doing this work for years and years and years. And it's an uphill battle that we're trying to wage and support Rachel and other folks to do. And I think there is movement. It's just a slow moving thing because the state is slow moving.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's an excellent question.
Yeah, I mean, it's 6:04, and I want to say, I put in the chat, but I really want to say thank you so much to the Center for Black Diaspora and the Women's Center and affiliates for having us and just being here. And thank you all for listening, asking questions, sharing, and because Anne loves Love and Protect so much, we're always grateful to come here, and we love Anne so much that it's just hard not to give her a big hug right now. So there's an air hug right here, big air hug. And we thank you so much for the support. It's so appreciated and so loved.
Thank you. This has been really so amazing. And so every time I hear you all talk and participate in these events, I learn so much, so really, really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that so many people are here. And I love the group letter to Tewkunzi. Just thank you. Thank you so much. Really powerful.